This is Sports for Real. I know it's kind of bright, the background here, but given that Halloween is only 2 days away, the background fits well. It's like a pumpkin color. Kind of reminds you of the Cleveland Browns a little bit. You see what happened when they took on the Ravens the other day. Everybody and their mama expecting the Browns to get blown out, and what happened? Surprise, surprise. NFL rears his ugly head again. This when you think you got everything figured out, something backfires and it shoots you in the ankle. Here the Ravens are, which I call the regular season Ravens lovingly. They were playing lights out over the last 5 weeks. They got the running game going. Even Jackson throwing some pinpoint passes, hit some deep passes down the field. It looked like a championship outfit. But when things are going your way, it tends to work that way, and it snowballs. But the problem is when you start ringing up a whole lot of points, and I don't care what sport it is, you go to score at a high level, and you're just blowing people out. It doesn't matter if you win by 1 or 1,000. It's just one win. But there are times when you need those points, and you can't get them because you used them all up in the previous game. And I think that's what happened to the Ravens. Like I told you guys before, there's a formula to beating the Ravens, and it has to be adjusted a little bit. You cannot let Henry get loose. If Henry starts breaking long runs, that energizes the whole team, and people start to get confident, and they started playing over their head a little bit. But like I told you before, you guys are celebrating and think the Ravens automatically got the ticket punched to the championship game. It don't work that way, and the Browns showed you. Even with a quarterback like Jameis Winston, come back and bite him right on the ankle. But I want to talk a little bit about college football. I asked a question the other day, is Indiana for real? Well, it certainly looks like Indiana is for real. They ran off Nebraska, and then they just dusted off Washington the other day. So now they're perfect 8-0, the first time they ever went 8-0 in Indiana history. Plus, they are 5-0 in the Big Ten. So the only games they have remaining, they got Michigan State, then Michigan, and the big game against Ohio State. Ohio State, I thought they were going to bounce back and after losing to Oregon and dominate Nebraska, who was just blown out by Indiana. But they needed some heroics and things to go their way to get by Nebraska. So as I look at Indiana, the way they took down Nebraska, Ohio State is a game they can win. But the question is, will they have their quarterback? That starting quarterback got hurt. The backup quarterback still played pretty well, but I think with that starting quarterback, they can go into Columbus and beat Ohio State. But that's going to be conference game number 8. If they can get by Michigan State, which they should outscore Michigan. They should go into Columbus 7-0 in the Big Ten. And if they do, they got a shot to beat Ohio State that day. But even if they don't, if they go 7-1 in the conference, they still may find themselves in the Big Ten championship. So surprise, surprise. All these super conferences, you're going to weed out the weak. And what happens? The traditionally weak teams rise up to go to the conference championship game. But it's going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of weeks to see just how good the Hoosiers can do. But at any rate, it's good to see teams that don't normally do anything actually produce. Now the other team, Texas A&M, they're in a similar situation as Indiana. Just so happened that their schedule didn't put them against a whole lot of heavyweights, on paper at least. There's no Oklahomans there. There's no Alabama, no Georgia. They did play Florida, and they just whipped LSU the other day. That's one of those teams they're pretty much going to have to play every year because that's an old rival. They were rivals before they started coming up with all these conference games. Some of you may remember, if you're around my age, SEC and the Big Ten, all they had to play was 6 conference games. And when they were playing 6 conference games, LSU and Texas A&M would play every year. It's only when the conferences start to grow that a lot of the rivalries died. Pittsburgh used to play Pitt, and A&M and LSU. Games like that, they had to go away because of conference accommodation. But it's good to see these old rivalries renewed and have something on the line. But now, Texas A&M, after getting by LSU, All they have to do is get by Auburn, and the next game up is South Carolina, which they got 2 weeks to get ready for. If they get by South Carolina and Auburn, they'll go into their conference championship game against Texas. And that would pretty much be an elimination game for Texas. And they're not playing so great right now, and they are vulnerable. And if Texas A&M, who don't like Texas, by the way, matter of fact, they went to the SEC to get away from Texas because Texas was this big shadow, and they got this Big Ten network, and they didn't want to share the money with everybody else. So Texas A&M got tired of it. They don't like Texas to the point where Texas, ever the great sport, tried to lend a olive branch, if you will, say, let's start playing again. But A&M said no. They wanted to play Texas. Texas wanted to play them in 22 and 23, which means they would have played the last 2 years before actually coming to the conference. But A&M, they don't want nothing to do with Texas. And even that they have to play them now because they're in the conference, where they used to play that traditional rivalry game on Thanksgiving night, let's move to Saturday. They just don't want to have nothing to do with Texas anymore, and in a lot of ways, I think it's justified. But I tell you this: if both of those teams come into the conference to the last game of the season with the conference championship berth on the line, the way A&M is playing, they're gonna put something on Texas. And I picked Texas to win the conference and the national championship. But after seeing Georgia whip them up front, they got a lot of holes to fix. And Quinn Ewers, he's got cracks in his game where he should have been stepping up. He holding the ball, and Georgia was just wiping out his hand. It was like routine. If he wants to play in the NFL, he's going to have to fix that. And that's the kind of pressure he's going to see if he gets to the NFL. But that's down the line. We're not really concerned about that. But it looks like to me, if Texas A&M is going to get by Auburn and South Carolina, and they're going to end up playing in that conference championship game. But it's going to be interesting to see because you got a lot of teams. They got a lot of hurdles to jump over this last month of the season, and it's a big shot in the arm for the sport because any previous year you see the same old matchups, and you had an idea who was going to win when the schedule came out. So that's great. But speaking of old-time rivals, this week you got Florida and Georgia down here in Jacksonville, and with the way things are going, I'm starting to feel like Florida just might have a shot to knock Georgia off. They've been whipping Florida lately, and they probably going to come down here. You know how human nature is. They probably got the idea that, maybe we're just going to show up and beat them again. But Florida is actually starting to play some pretty good football. And if they come down here and they don't turn the ball over, they got a shot to beat Georgia. Georgia's not invincible. Yeah, they ranked number 2, but I've seen Florida do it to them before. They showed up right here in Jacksonville, and right there waiting on the Bulldogs. So if the Bulldogs don't come down here ready to play, they might just be the next team to get upset. I'm telling you right now, I'm not ready to call it yet, but it's a great possibility. All right? So I don't have a whole lot of time. The other day I was on here running my mouth at the Jaguar game. I was on for like an hour and a half. That was great. But I don't have time for that. I got to go to work like a lot of you guys. So let me see what some of the comments said. Go ahead and pop that deadlift out. Now, I don't know if you guys are talking about me. We don't care about what we're hearing until we get a deadlift pops. What are you talking about, man? I like turnip greens, and what's your best sweet potato pie recipe? I got a sweet potato pie recipe, but I'm going to charge you for it. You send me a super chat, and I'll send you a sweet potato recipe. Got some pound cake recipe for you, too. But we're talking about the recipe to try to get to these conference championship games, man. And it's a tough road to hold for a lot of these teams. And I'm going to sit back and watch and see what takes place. All right? So, again, Indiana, surprise, surprise. They had never been this relevant in the Big Ten race this late in the season. They've never been 8-0. And with Michigan struggling, Michigan State's been struggling since D'Antonio left. And you see how vulnerable Ohio State is. They could possibly wind up in the Big Ten championship. Same thing with Texas A&M. They've always had good talent there. I thought Kevin Sumlin did a good job. They ran him off for Jimbo Fisher, who didn't really do a whole lot. They should have kept Sumlin, and they're going to get if that's all they were going to get out of Fisher. And now Elko, younger mindset, more into it. He's got good talent left behind by Fisher, but he can actually coach them. So Texas A&M right now is a very dangerous opponent. Oregon will be the Big Ten champions. I hear people talking about Oregon like they're invincible. They're invincible against teams that match up wrong with the wrong game plans. But there are defenses in the SEC that can stop that, or at least slow it down. Not Ohio State, but Georgia and Alabama in particular. So maybe Oregon will win the Big Ten, the way they're moving their football. Great, but I think if they played Ohio State, the team that loses a close game the first time, they usually win the second time. So if they played Indiana, they probably would win the Big Ten. But if they played Ohio State, it's another coin toss. All right, but that's a good pick. I mean, it's not a risk, given that the way they're playing. A risk would be somebody taking Indiana to win the conference. I'm not going to do that, but I will say if they go in there in Columbus and blow them out to get that berth in the championship, then they're going to be sky high, and it would make a difference if Oregon alumni came in there and played them with Dan Fouts a quarterback. It's going to be tough for them to get that victory, because when you start getting teams that never won anything and they start to see that they have an opportunity to win, that's a team that's going to be hard to beat. All right, so again, got to go to work. Just to recap, keep an eye on Texas A&M and Indiana. Now, one thing about teams like that hadn't won anything, once they realize where they are, then they start to realize the realities of the situation, and then they start to fall apart. I don't know if that's what happened with Texas. I think Texas is still punch drunk after being dominated up front by Georgia. But once they shake that off, they're going to be fine. But if they continue to play like they're playing right now, it's going to be a bad day when they go to College Station at the end of next month. So right now, waiting on RV City to open up down here in Jacksonville. And if you've never been to Florida, Georgia, the game is secondary. The two schools, they don't like each other, but that's during the game. But around the game, up to the game, oh man, it don't even make a difference what team you're from. I've seen the Bulldogs hosting an RV full of Gator fans and vice versa. It doesn't matter. It's one big party. Everybody get along like gangbusters. It's just on the field. They want their teams to win, but everybody else is having a good time, man. That's why they used to call it the largest cocktail party. They can't call it that no more for political reasons, I suppose. But if you want to have a good time, come on down here to Jacksonville. I believe that the RVs open up tomorrow, and from that point on, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, those nights, it's going to be a big party down here in Jacksonville. So come on down here and check us out. So until next time, I got to go to work. This is Sports for Real. Appreciate you all tuning in. Catch you next time. I'm out.